Welcome to episode 7 of the Discovery Files. Today is going to be part 1 of a new discovery called Andover. And when we came up with this show, had the idea that we would be able to roll through and interview different people involved with discoveries, and pretty rapidly in trying to line up interviews realized that we couldn't be able to do them sequentially. So hence the naming scheme on the show is, if you want to follow just the Invincible discovery in sequence, you can go through and do Invincible 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And then likewise with this Andover discovery, you can do 1, 2, 3, and 4 on this. That way we can continue to record episodes as we jump around and talk to different folks. So hopefully you enjoy our part 1 of the Andover discovery, where we interview Paul Smith. Why don't you introduce yourself and then maybe start diving into how this discovery came about?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I guess first of all, pretty excited to tell the story of the Andover discovery and the story of the people involved. I joined Azure in 2021. I'd spent 9.5 years at Aluka before that. Almost became institutionalized there. Shook the shackles and went looking for a company that could help me get some experience in nickel exploration. So Azure had plenty of money in the bank at the time, and they just made I think they were 4 or so holes into the Andover nickel discovery. So managed to convince the people at Azure, Tony and Graham Lever, that they should take on a mineral sands geo with a little bit of nickel experience historically.
And why nickel? Why did you want to focus on that?
So I did. Aluka had a team in 2015, that sort of period where they were looking for nickel in the West Gawler Craton, and
Okay.
so I sort of got involved in that and thought this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I was a pretty good mineral sands geo, but yeah, wanted to branch out a little bit, I guess. So,
Yeah, cool.
yeah.
And what were you doing before Luca?
That was pretty much my first role out of
Okay.
uni. I sort of graduated pretty late in life at 27. I spent a lot of time doing other things before that, and yeah. So
You mentioned some of that. Was that the band life that you were living prior to that?
yeah, studying part time and trying to be a rock star, and didn't really
Yeah.
work out. But
I have to ask the question, what was the band's name?
you can edit this bit out.
No, we're definitely gonna leave it in.
Heck yeah.
It was the Rex Wicked.
The Rex
The
Wicked.
Rex Wicked, and it was a bit of a
That's great.
it's like a story where someone said something like, they meant to say, I reckon it looks wicked, and accidentally said, I'm looking at Rex Wicked. It's like a spoonerism or something. So
Yeah, cool. And like the genre of music, obviously bluegrass country music is what I'm thinking here.
far from it. No, it was more like sort of prog rock.
Oh yeah, wow.
Some similar to Muse in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because you were mentioning your brother is still quite heavy in the music scene. So is there still any desire to go back into that in that type of life?
Not really. We stepped into this studio today, and I thought, oh, maybe maybe I should bring the bass down, and yeah, but no, I didn't.
Yeah, fair enough. So Luca, so you're finishing up with the Luca. You want to do something different.
Tony and Graham took a chance on a mineral sands geo, and we started expanding our exploration on the nickel front. Dr. Coombs came on board not long
Yeah.
after me, and he'd been at IGO, so he brought a little bit more nickel experience to the show, and we made a couple of discoveries there. Obviously, Andover was already they'd got a few holes into it already.
Yeah.
The exploration team expanded that, and we discovered Ridgeline just to the west of Andover. And we learnt a lot about the Andover complex and the nickel system mainly, which was, we were drilling from when I joined in early 2021, February, through to early 2022, all the way through until the end of 2020. In fact, was all nickel related drilling. So,
Yeah.
and that covered part of the time that we started lithium exploration as well.
So I want to ask, like, so when you joined Azure, like, what were your expectations? Like, what did you want to get out of that role?
Yeah, look, I just wanted to expand my geological knowledge, really. I loved mineral sands. It's probably gets a bad rap in the industry, but it is actually quite complex, and there's some pretty amazing geos working in that field that I was lucky enough to work with. But yeah, I just wanted to expand my knowledge. I thought orthomagmatic nickel systems were pretty interesting. And we found taxitic gabbros at Andover, and probably didn't know what a taxitic gabbro was before I joined Azure, but
Yeah.
just fascinating systems. So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you just wanted to get basically a fresh start on like kind of your geological, I guess, knowledge, career, something like that.
Yeah, and I just didn't want to become a one-trick pony, I guess.
Yeah.
So back then, nickel was kind of on a tear, right? Like it'd been doing pretty good.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we were getting relatively good response from the market at the time. We were certainly, aiming to bring the Andover and Ridgeline deposits into production. That was the plan. We were doing a scoping study at the same time
Hmm.
as exploration. We had other targets. We were sort of branching out across the complex and trying to find the next big one on the nickel front, which is kind of what led us to the lithium as well. Like we were expanding our exploration, trying to track down the mineralized intrusion
Hmm.
across the complex. This highly fractionated taxitic gabbro that was the host of the mineralization.
Were you running lithium assays at the same time? Like, were you actively exploring for lithium while you were?
No, we were focused on the western half of the Andover intrusion for a lot of the time, and even now there isn't any pegs or pegmatites getting in that area. So we were focused on the nickel in the early days, all of 2021, probably the first few months of 2022, and Josh was actually out to the west of the nickel project when doing some mapping when he came across the first bit of mineralization. So I think it was near the outcrop of what is now AP11, which turns out to be at depth 100 and something meters thick and really high grade lithium. Yeah, he found that pegmatite. Didn't tell anyone, and then went on 6 weeks leave, which is pretty. And by the time he got back from leave, we had sort of on a different path, just through some historical reports and reviewing old data. We'd become a lithium explorer by the time he got back from leave. So
Yeah.
sort of
Okay.
like two convergent initial discoveries, which is pretty cool.
And so when was the switch to lithium? Like, yeah, obviously you maybe paint just a picture to listeners that like that was the time when the nickel world kind of upended a little bit. So was it a conscious decision to go into lithium because of that, or was it that you just thought you were probably getting to the end of, like, I guess, the nickel targets that you had, or the obvious nickel targets, and then was it to expand to try to see something or to find something else on the ground?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both, maybe. Like, the lithium market was pretty hot at the time, and our managing director Tony had been at a few conferences, and perhaps there was a bit of talk about lithium, and we'd known from when we first picked up the project in 2020 that there were pegmatites around.
Okay.
I think when our admin geologist and database geo Jen Pretty, she was doing some just data compilation for the project when we picked it up for nickel off
Yep.
Creasy, obviously, and she, I think she'd sent an email saying there's pegmatites here or something. So
Yeah. Okay.
so Tony came to me and sort of said, "Oh, can you follow this up?" And so I sort of started looking at the old reports, and we found a bunch of specimens in the museum, the WA museum, that were from 5 miles southeast of Roebourne. We went into the museum, we checked out those specimens. There was, cassiterite and columbite, beryl, and spodumene, which, it's been sitting there since the 1950s. Those samples had been donated by Don McLeod, who
Hmm.
was a Aboriginal rights campaigner,
Yep.
and he'd worked that ground, used a bit of cassiterite and some beryl, some tantalum as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, because I think the tantalum one is like the interesting one because, a lot of people went after tin tantalum like deposits, and that's a story that I'd heard, is that there were these like historic, I guess, tin tantalum. I wouldn't say production, but I think it was like really small scale kind of, I guess, production really at that time. And then so people knew that the area had some, had some juice, like it was going to be interesting. It's just that no one had quite unraveled it properly until you guys kind of did it.
Yeah, and there definitely was some production. And in the 1959 Mines Department report in Western Australia, there's mention of production of cassiterite tantalum out of that pit 5 miles
Yep.
southeast of Roebourne. Description of them, they're south of Roebourne, maximum 2 to 3 meters wide. So maybe that was sort of the limiting factor on anyone coming across them before and doing something with them. And when we did the initial mapping, like you've got some pretty big pegmatites, but they're barren. A lot of the mineralized pegmatites, or what turned out to be the mineralized pegs, were quite thin at surface.
Yeah. Okay.
For whatever reason, just the erosional level. Yeah, I don't know.
It kind of plays into like with some of the other people we've talked to. There's often this concept in exploration where it's like you have to have scale, you have to have, like the size to make an ore deposit. And so you can imagine seeing these skinny pegmatites on the surface. People are going to be like, there's no scale, there's no legs to make this thing into an ore deposit. Let's keep going.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's something that, working with call them a major company as like a Luca in their field, I guess. We always talked about scale when we did our project rankings, and
Yeah.
so I guess with Andover, and especially I think why SQM eventually came on board after just a single site visit with myself and one of the other geos, was that we got a helicopter and we were walking and walking and walking along these pegmatites, and I guess in our mind and probably theirs that it was always, if these blow out anywhere, like if we get
Yeah.
some structural complexity at depth, if they blow out, then
Yeah.
we're in the money here because these are mineralized.
And I think, without throwing people under the bus, I think that was one of the things that when people reviewed your project, and I know this was the case, but people reviewed, like on surface, the pegmatites look thin, they look skinny. But it was really the depth dimension that changed the scale quotient. So I think on the surface, you can see that they were quite long and they covered a large area. But it was really the thickness came when you started drilling them out at depth, and then they started blowing out.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just curious, like so far in the podcast, we don't tend to talk too much geology, but this seems like one of those perfect kind of segues into it. Did you come up with a hypothesis on where they might blow out and why? Or did you just get lucky?
But the first 5 holes that we drilled, we were limited by access. So we had, we were waiting for a heritage survey to the south and POWs to be approved, environmental approvals. So, we drilled our first 5 holes. We hit our first mineralized pegmatite. It wasn't particularly thick. We managed to get across the other side where the heritage was then cleared. And I think it was hole 6 or 7 that we drilled and hit 50 or 60 meters.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. I don't know that maybe Josh might have a better answer, but he's thought of one since and made it like he knew it at the time. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. He's
That's
fit the
how we
story
always
around it.
we do exploration, right? As we go,
Yeah.
well, I did some fantastic geology work, and there it was.
Yeah. I guess one of the things we did do, once we'd hit that big intersection, and probably we learnt pretty early on from the rock chips that there was a bit of an association with our high grade stuff, or just any of the lithium grades with SG. So routinely at Andover, even through the nickel exploration, we would, if we were sending a sample to the lab, we'd SG it in the core yard. So that association that Josh sort of worked out and then weaponized allowed us to, when we did start drilling and we started getting intersections, we could actually predict the grade that we were going to get from those drill holes. And lab turnarounds at the time were 6 to 8 weeks. We were smashing them with 3,500 meters of drilling per rig per month.
Yep.
So the turnarounds were huge, and the results going out to the market were even further along. We were getting, as an exploration team, we were getting so far ahead.
Yeah.
And probably the directors and the board probably didn't even realize, necessarily that we were getting, so far ahead. We were so far advanced in our knowledge of where the mineralization was and where the pegmatites were going. Yeah.
So,
And then
I'm just kind of curious on that front. Were you able to like secure additional financing when you had that sixth hole that hit some pretty good stuff, or was it, that you already were well funded and so you're able to kind of hammer this one area?
Yeah. So I think SQM first came to site in November of 2022. I'll answer your question, but there's an interesting story that I was sitting in the boardroom at Azure when SQM first came into the office, and they were just generally talking about how they were going to do a site visit and what they wanted to do. And
Yep.
I sort of said, some of this terrain's pretty pretty dodgy. It's going to take a while, and it's going to be hard, especially in November in Roebourne. It's starting to get hot. Yeah, you probably should get a helicopter, I think. And everyone sort of laughed at me. Typical exploration geo just wants a helicopter ride.
Hell yeah.
I went off and I had to get back down to our gold project, and I got a phone call saying, "Oh, you need to get back to Roebourne. SQM are hiring a helicopter." So we flew around, and so yeah, and they did their site visit. They're either really good poker players. What I was thinking at the time is they're really good poker players, or they don't actually know what they're looking at. And I'm sure I know both the guys really well, and I know that they knew what they were looking at, but they were just keeping it cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, Scott.
That must have been I guess, a bit of a nervous moment, because I've kind of experienced that in the past as well, where it's like you're excited, you see what's there, and then the other partner is like, and whether they're really excited or not, if they're really good at their jobs, they're going to make it seem like they're bored, and
Yeah.
I guess we'll finish the tour, But were you nervous during that time?
Definitely, and I was like chasing them around like a puppy dog, saying, "Oh, have a look at this! Look at this! Is the mineralization. This is what we're seeing across the project." And
Yeah.
yeah, they
Getting
were
the 2-word answers back.
yeah. Sure, mate. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because like you guys would have taken a number of companies around that time, and so, and I've like Scott said, like having done it before, like you like the really good groups, they don't give anything away. So you're like constantly kind of having these groups come through, and you get nothing out of them. Where so you go, I don't know, do they think it was good, bad? And you don't really know the conversations that management are having, like their management and your management, because you're sometimes not privy to them. So yes, it's a little bit of like a dark kind of moment where you're always under you're always under a cloud of information because you don't really know everything that's going on.
Yeah, it was definitely that way. We left site. We took advantage of the helicopter being there, and we smashed out, another 400 rock chip samples or something over the next couple of days.
Yeah.
Graham Lever, Josh, myself, and a couple of the other geos. And then, maybe a few days later or a week, Tony came into my office back in Perth and said, "Oh, the guys from SQM, like, what were they like on site? Were they interested? What did you say to them?" I said, "Oh, I just chased them around and told them this is a mineralization." And he said, "Well, they've just offered us $20 million for 20% of the company." So I nearly fell off my chair, but we knew, I think, that we had something, and it was all about scale.
Yeah.
And I guess going back to your original question, Scott, was that when we got started drilling, I think before SQM we might have had 5 million in the bank, and then we then we had 20 million or something. So we got stuck into drilling, and that first drill hole, 102 meters of 1.3% or something like that, hole 8, that we drilled into the pegmatites really set the world on fire, I think. So I don't think money was a massive issue after that.
Yeah.
I bet they were so excited about their investment at that point for that little money to get 20%. So
Yeah.
it's interesting too, because that's usually where you get that level of ownership, and then they can put someone on the board, and it can kind of change the feel of a company at that point, right? Did you kind of experience that at all?
Probably not until sort of closer to the takeover, when SQM and Hancock sort of joined forces. I think SQM, they were pretty hands off, in the probably in 2023, for the majority of it. They'd put the money in. I think they knew we were doing a pretty good job. We were pumping out pretty good results. We'd put together a pretty incredible team of young geos that I spent a lot of time curating, lots of time after hours out on the deck at my place, calling geos through contractors and just going with my gut, basically, and having a chat like we are. And all right, well, this guy or girl's a pretty good fit for the team. And all right, can you start next week? That sort of thing.
I mean, you should talk a little bit about this because like I think it's people that were following this can kind of see like you guys scaled very quickly. Like the number of rigs you guys had. I mean, maybe paint the picture. Like, how big was the team when you guys were still kind of in the initial phases? Because you never drilled the Andover nickel to the same scale, did you? You had what, a couple of rigs?
Yeah, I think at times we had 3 diamond rings at the projects.
So that's still pretty big. Like, that's still big for a small team, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, we drilled 199 diamond holes.
Yeah, wow, okay.
Not all of
So
them.
you had like 3 or 4 geos, something like that.
Yeah, so 3. So it was Graham, the exploration manager, and Josh and myself as seniors in the early days, and then usually three geos and 2 or 3 fieldies on site that we were sort of rotating through on the roster. So
So I was going to ask you about like so you were a senior geo at this point when it was lithium, or sorry, when it was nickel. And then did you kind of change roles at all during this point, or were you doing like this whole walk around with these people as a senior geo and wondering if you were saying the right things or not saying the right things?
I think when I was doing the recruiting, I was still a senior, and then Josh and I both got a bit of a promotion. I think it was in maybe midway through 2023, and I was an exploration superintendent, and Josh was chief geo. So yeah, I mean, but I was definitely out on the ground a lot. Even when I was a superintendent, I was out pegging heritage sites or exclusion zones and pads and all sorts of stuff. So,
yeah. I mean, in a small team, like, like in a small team, the title is kind of irrelevant to some degree to the work that you do. You might be senior geo, but you're effectively 2 IC to like kind of the exploration manager or to the MD, right? Because like there's no like 3 levels of organizational like levels between you and it's like the MD goes, "Oh, we need someone to do this. Yeah, is the field available? No, looks like it's you." Like it's like I think the title and the role are kind of sometimes not really as well set in those type of teams.
And it's easy when you've got cool rocks to look at as well. It's like it's pretty much self motivation. You don't really need to be asked twice. So.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So, like, as you were going around and doing, because you spent a lot of time just with boots on the ground, did that adapt, like, kind of your vision of the geology? Did it change through time because of the time you spent pegging archaeology sites and cultural heritage survey stuff? Did that all feed into your understanding of what the rocks were telling you?
Yeah, definitely. Lots of observations, about the pegmatites as we walked around. Like even getting an access track must have been, I don't know, must have been October 2020 or maybe June 2023. I was walking in like a 3-kilometer long access track into target area 3, and just finding pegmatites that we didn't know about before, or mineralization, or just the way that they're interacting with the wall rocks, and finding these biotite schists that run along the contacts, and lots of interesting stuff, and learned a lot just by being out on the ground doing non-geological things for sure.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think that's one of the things that I've seen a lot of commonalities in this, where companies that farm that out to other people to do, like they bring a tech in to do it, or they, like they have non-geologists doing these kind of things, like, oh, we're going to have a surveyor peg this, and we're going to have environmental go out on this, or even things like soil surveys, if you have non-geologists collecting your samples. I kind of feel like the commonality to a lot of these discoveries is the people that make more discoveries seem to be spending more time in the field doing non-geological things, which still guides their understanding of the rocks, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely the case for us. And an example of that is that during the nickel exploration days, led by Josh, did a tenement-wide sampling program, and it was like a 10-meter by 10-meter sample spacing on kilometer-long lines, maybe a kilometer apart as well. And we sent out 2 fieldies to do the work. And so we just gave them a point and said, get a sample from here. And as it turns out, when we went back and looked at that data, probably post discovery, or at least once we'd got a whole suite of rock chips back from mineralized pegmatites, we realized that those guys had actually picked up, maybe half a dozen samples that were running lithium grade.
Yeah.
And yeah, probably answered your question earlier, Scott, whether we had done some lithium assays. And I don't think, because we were looking for nickel, we were using lithium borate XRF, so we weren't assaying for lithium. So we went back and assayed some of those samples, and surely enough, there was some lithium
So
there.
that implies that someone on the team had seen lithium-bearing pegmatites before.
Yeah, yep.
So think
But
about if
they
you'd
probably didn't know what it was
hadn't.
because it was a fieldy.
Yeah, I mean, but like when you guys reviewed the samples, right? Because if you're not taking lithium assays, someone recognized that there's lithium bearing pegmatites, and what if they'd never worked in a lithium bearing system before?
Yeah.
I mean, this is, I think, an interesting part of the story of your team. We're hoping to get another member of your team, Ellie, on as well. And so yeah, so she was an interesting case in that she was a graduate, I think, at that time, and so she just recently finished her honors on pegmatites, and so you had this interesting structure where. Yeah, like I'm gonna try to say this diplomatically. You know, you come from a mineral sands background where you were kind of learning the nickel system, and then you're having to learn the whole world of pegmatites. Yeah, you have Josh, who is a trained geologist, but a large part of his experience was also nickel systems, quite high end nickel system. I'm not sure what Graham's background was, but I doubt he was a pegmatite guy as well, was he?
He might have kicked a few in his time in around Leonora or Laverton or something. But
Yeah, just to get them out of the way to
yeah,
to do other
yeah,
things that he was doing at the time. So yeah, so you had this like interesting team where like probably the most knowledgeable person about pegmatites was a recent graduate that kind of come in. And so so it's an interesting team dynamic in that how and the reason why I mentioned that is to your point, Scott, is that sometimes in like small teams you have to find the information the best way you can, right? Because you don't have a big team, you don't have people that have small levels of experience and high levels of experience. Sometimes you have 0 or 1, right?
Yeah,
And so you kind of have to rely on those people to still kind of guide you in whichever way they can.
yeah, for sure. And Ellie's experience was yeah, really useful. And we had another geo, Mark May, who um, just loves minerals, and so when we started looking at the rock chips and stuff, he was right into it as well. But I guess one of the things we did really early on in 2022, and I think it was June, we got a world-renowned lithium expert, Peter Spitalny. He, if there's a pegmatite that exists in the world, he probably knows about it. So we got him in just to say, hey, Pete, what do we need to do here? Like, assay method, sampling methodologies, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. And it really put us on the right path. And interestingly, he was actually Josh's high school geology teacher when they still taught geology in high school in Australia.
Yeah.
So,
small world.
yeah, so I mean that's how the connection was made. Josh's knew the guy, got him in. We got him to site. We took him around to a bunch of pegmatites. We didn't see any spodumene, mainly because he couldn't get across to where we knew the mineralization was, just due to some health stuffs. But yeah, and evidently we drove past a outcrop of mineralization with him that we later identified.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
the reason why I make the point is like we've done the story of Invincible, and yeah, so like there's some parallels in the fact that people like Aisha and people like Aaron that were that were graduates, right? And they are put into this place where they have to filter information and figure out what's relevant and what's not. And then there's not they are getting mentoring in some way, but they're maybe not necessarily getting mentoring in the pure technical aspects of what they're like, what the stuff that they're doing. They're getting a mentoring in like, well, if you have the ability to be curious about this, go figure it out.
yeah,
Right. And then it's on them to kind of go and say, well, actually, I'm gonna go get this information whichever way I can, and then filter it. And you're kind of the lens to say, oh yeah, good information, bad information, or not enough information, whatever it is. And I feel like this like like there's a few discovery stories where it's often the best ability they provide is just that curiosity of wanting to know more, and they go and kind of grab that information along the way.
yeah, and that's right. And we really threw Ellie in the deep end as well on a lot of occasions. So as I said, I'm hiring all these geos to come
Hmm.
in. At the time, it was actually quite difficult to put that team together. There wasn't a lot of geos on the market, and most geos I spoke to were already in a role. I had to convince them,
So you're
through
trying to poach them out or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, with my charm, trying to say, you're going to learn so much. This is world class discovery. It's going to be amazing. You'll be able to look back on this in 5, 10 years' time and say, oh, I was part of that. And probably
But
most
that's a
most
hard thing when
hard.
you're a young geo, right? Is if you've got a steady job and then someone's coming and trying to poach you out of that steady job on what often sounds like fanciful promises, right? It's a big risk, and not everybody's willing to do that. And I sometimes wonder how much that actually plays a role in the selection process of who comes to these projects, because you end up with people who are a little bit more risk taking. Maybe they're a little bit hungrier for information, or maybe just more, desperate for a job change. I don't know what it is, but it seems to be a part of the ingredients of success, right?
Yeah, and we had very little turnover too. Like, so, there might have been a few that sort of came and went pretty quickly, but we had a pretty solid team for all of 2023. Or well, when I say all of 2023, it was like June through to the end of 2023 was when we were accelerating and had 8 diamond rigs on site and 3 RC rigs at one point. It was hectic. But yeah, so Ali, she was like bringing those people up to speed, and she was giving a Lithium 101 presentation to all these new starters that I was throwing. I'm like, Ali, there's a new geo coming today. Funnily enough, I know you just did this yesterday, but can you do it again? Because
Yeah.
I've got them on a flight.
It's hard not to burn out people too doing that, right? Because like they start feeling like all they're doing is training another new person, and
Yeah,
it takes a special person to do that well, right? It's very important who you hire to actually contribute meaningfully to the whole project, and so all these different ways, right?
yeah, for sure. And she did a great job. So yeah,
So can you talk a little bit about, one of the things we caught up, like when we caught up for coffee before this, we talked about the fact that you had to put this team together pretty quickly. And so I'm interested in knowing that, you managed to keep it together. Can you talk a little bit about how did you go about putting a team like that? How did you pick people? How did you, what was the Paul Smith gut factor that allowed you to pick certain people over others? I'm just curious to know how you went through that process.
yeah, the Paul Smith gut became a bit of a thing between Graham, Josh, and myself. When I was doing the recruiting, I guess I stepped back, and when we were expanding, we had 3 RC rigs on the way, and we already had 2 diamond rigs on site. Tony sort of said to me, "Do whatever you need to do to make it happen."
Yeah.
And so I took that as hire as many geos and fieldies as I could. Because I was listening to the previous podcast and just thinking about the stresses of not having enough people and that sort of thing made me think back to what I did, and I just really pushed hard to get people, because you always hear about stories of discovery or just on a rig, and it's always if the people fall over because they're overworked or
Yeah.
really stressed, and your project's in troubles. I think I hired, I don't know, by October probably had 14 or 15 geos and 20 fieldies, and we'd started to get other people involved as well, like enviros and safety and all that sort of thing.
And that's a big challenge too, because like the team doesn't exactly have a chance to gel in the calm, right? Like they're right into the fire, and it's like they're either going to work with each other well or they're not. And sometimes that's okay when like people don't always have to get along and be friends, but they always have to work together well when it's that kind of high pressure environment with like a rig preserve going, right?
Yeah, and we really tried to create a culture on site, where people were getting exposed to geology. As you said earlier, Mark, that I think the team that we ended up putting together, like they were all interested in geology. I'd sold the dream. I talked about the nickel system, and I talked about the lithium system, and although you're coming to look at the lithium, I'll take you out to the Taxity Gabbros where you
Yep.
can see the mineralizing intrusion coming through, and we'll take you out to the discovery outcrops. So
Yep.
just really tried to get them involved, and we started a weekly technical meeting where we were sort of talking. We were in Perth, they were on site, or if we happened to be on site, we'd be in the room and just trying to get the team involved. I've heard stories of current companies who are not even giving their geos their assay results.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're trying to
I've
figure out
worked for
what they're
companies like that.
logging, and they don't know where the gold is until they get the ASX release out,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
So
it's just
You feel
crazy.
really trusted when that's going on, right?
Yeah. So if you're out there listening, don't do that.
Yeah. So, what was your experience like during this time? I mean, were you getting pretty stressed, or was it feeling like it was coming together? I guess what was your day-to-day thought process?
Paul used to have a whole head of hair. Look what
Yeah,
happened to
I
him.
know.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, I would say that you think that discoveries, I think as geos, we all dream of making a discovery, and in our case, a world-class discovery. You think it's going to be the best time of your life, and in so many ways, it was. Josh and I swanning around diggers and dealers in sparkly jackets, and watching the company grow from $70 million company to a $1.7 billion takeover, and all of these things. We're getting exposed to so much stuff. But yeah, it was stressful. It was chaos. Trolled
Yeah.
chaos. But yeah, it was, and my wife. I probably never really thanked her publicly for the support that she gave me. But yeah, she's a big part of the success story as well. Like our families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that's an important point because you get sucked into like a lot of stuff and it spills over. I mean, you and I talked about in our pre-interview chat, like you're working to all hours of the night, trying to recruit people, go through CVs, doing all of that stuff. Yeah, so all of that stuff does impact on like your family life as well.
Yeah, for sure.
It's an interesting one, right? Like I used to jokingly say it, but now I seriously say it, where it's like my number one career goal is to stay married. And it's the support you get from a spouse or significant other that truly understands that there's these trying times and you can get through them together. You can't give enough credit to people like that, right? It is not easy. There's all the difficult moments of, you're living the high life at times where you're flying around and doing the whining and dining, and they have a sick baby that's crying at home and won't stop crying, and it's like you can't give people enough credit for that. Right? It's definitely a team effort there.
Yeah, for sure. And I certainly can't give my wife enough credit for that. I dragged her through Kazakhstan for a couple of years as well, so she's been through the ringer.
And so one of the other things that you mentioned in that talk that we had was like some of the not glorious parts of discovery, and I think everyone gets that. Everyone gets the part of you guys wearing sparkly jackets, walking through diggers and dealers, and getting all the plaudits, right? But what are the like the non glorious parts of discovery? Can you talk a little bit about the pressure? Like that's the angle I kind of want to cover, right? Like you guys had this success, you had bidders basically out there trying to buy the company. So internally you had this conflict where you wanted to add as much value to the company as possible and do it quickly. And that creates a significant amount of pressure to keep delivering results in a certain way. You can't take a backward step. You can't start having, like less than desirable results. Can you talk a little bit about that pressure?
Yeah, as you said, like there was significant interest in the company. There was all the environmental and heritage considerations that we had to manage on the ground, and we had a team helping us with that. Yeah, that part of it was really really stressful. Like, but so many moving parts. 8 diamond rigs, 3 bulldozers, 3 excavators, 15 geos, 20 fieldies. Environmental surveys and heritage surveys, all this sort of stuff. Like it was just there's so many balls in the air, and we had some senior people on site. We probably had a gap there for a while where we didn't have enough senior people on site. So
Yep.
one person in particular like just copped so much on site as the only senior for a while, and yeah, we had to really, yeah, I think it was just expressing upwards that we needed more support, and just trying to get that sorted out. And sometimes it took time to get that happening.
Was there ever a conflict between you and management on where they thought you always were just always asking for more and more people?
No, definitely not.
Yeah, okay.
I feel like the board, the MD, CFO, even not bad for an accountant. They really had our backs, I
Okay.
think. And Graham, obviously as the exploration manager, had our backs as well, and allowed us to do what we needed to do to make it happen, and supported us when we could.
So that seems to be another commonality with a lot of discoveries, is having that trust all the way up to the board, right? Where, because I can imagine, like if you have this company early on where you have $5 million left and you're burning through money drilling, right? There can be a lot of pressure coming down from the board. And then as you have visitors coming, you might have a lot of very stressed out board members who really want to see this thing work. And if they don't trust you, I don't see how that works. But like, did you have a relationship with anybody on the board already? by this point, so you knew them well and you had some trust already, or was it building that through this process?
Yeah, I mean, Tony, obviously, we were very close with Tony. Tony's a geo, so he was always interested in what we're up to and trying to understand. So he when
Mhm.
he when he'd give a presentation, he would have substance to what he was saying. And the chairman as well, we knew pretty well. Probably Creasy's representative on the board, we probably didn't know Annie
Hmm.
particularly well, but we'd met Mark a couple
Hmm.
of times. So yeah, I mean, we knew them. I wouldn't say that we had a lot to do with the board directly, but I think we knew that they had our trust because we were still smashing out 3,500 meters a month per rig. So
Yeah, yeah, that's I mean, the part that like the again, like not to draw like always draw parallels, but like one of the interesting things about like the Invincible Discovery and St. Ives is that they largely, like you guys largely already had the logistic structure, the procedures, like all of that stuff in place in St. Ives because it has such a protracted history. Like environmental, like they already had a department that already did all of this stuff, all of that jazz. So the invincible side, you already have the capability. It's more like sending up the bat signal to call them into action. Whereas like like in Azure, you're kind of setting that stuff up on the fly, right? Because like I like not to sound disparaging, but I doubt you guys had highly evolved procedures for some of the stuff that you were doing around environmental and stuff. Like they all had to kind of be done along the way as you kind of went along.
yeah, I mean, we had someone on board who was there, sort of overseeing that sort of thing from the nickel days. So we did
Yeah.
have some
Yeah, oh, of
stuff.
course. Yeah, 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 of course. So the nickel side, yeah. So you kind of had like a like a dry run with the nickel side, and then you could apply a lot of that stuff on the lithium side. Yeah, I get
Yeah,
that.
but I think it's scale. Like scale blows anything out of the
Yeah,
water. And as I said, all those moving parts, like that was where we really had to pull our fingers out, so to speak, and yeah, make sure we were covering off on all of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, because missteps could have doomed any part of that process, right? Like if like all of a sudden kicked off a really bad relationship with the Aboriginal, heritage holders, that could be like one of those poison pills that makes someone walk away from the deal later down the road, right? So it's kind of that there's always that balance on your when you're early days in a project where you don't have people, and the geos are often the first person to make contact with anybody in the wild, right? So it's really important to keep that good relationship, or build it for the first time.
Yeah, and I mean, the project is so close to Roburn as well, so you're in the public eye. It's not in the middle of nowhere and the Tanami or something. So you'd
yeah,
still
yeah,
be, and that was probably one of the, I guess, one of the challenges was the competing, probably higher up from us, like just the competing interests, and the exploration team being able to see, our focus is on the rocks and the geology and the deposit, drilling it out, but still making sure we do the right thing on the other side. And then the person who's going to be taking that over, they're looking further down into the
yeah,
future. And that was, as always with a discovery, when it's going from becoming starting to become something from nothing,
yep,
you start to get that tension, because someone's got to take this on and
yep,
turn it into a mine. So, that's it's a point where things get between the exploration geos and who comes next. Like it gets a bit tense, I guess. So
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I was talking to Nick Tate, and he kind of described the same sort of thing where you go from soft hats to hard hats, right? And it's just like the day that transitions is a pretty weird time, right? Where it's and often it's not the people who are great at drilling out new discoveries don't often transition well into that new role with all the regulations and the hard hats and the safety glasses and everything, right?
yeah, I mean, from my personal point of view, like having worked at Iluka, I was across a lot of that, being exposed to it
hmm,
from the get go back in 2011 when I started at Iluka as a
yep.
young geo on the rigs. It was pretty easy for me to sort of manage that sort of stuff, but there was definitely elements within the company that
That struggled with it.
struggle with it. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's I think it's completely normal.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So now that you look back, like what would you do differently?
probably. Oh, it's so hard. It was such a blur. And, I've spent the last 12 months, my new role. I'm an exploration manager at Premier One Lithium. And I spent the last year sort of, although I'm trying to work hard, it's almost recovery as well. And, the reason why I left Azure was, I could see that they, the new owners, they've just paid $1.7 billion for this deposit that we've worked up. Mm. They probably want to put all their efforts and money into doing something with that and not
Hmm.
really exploring anymore. And I think, my whole career has been about exploration and, I dreamed about discovery and I think I still want to make another one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So so you weren't like, so in order to say that you weren't really motivated with kind of like the development side that project is now going under. You still want to get back into the exploration side.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess it would be a good string to add to the bow to have stuck around and kept
Hmm.
working on the development. But yeah, I think I just like being out and finding new things and I want to share my experience with other young geos and get
Yeah.
them excited. And we did our first drilling program at Premier One and my young geo, you say, had my discovery jacket on. The hole was not that great, but I liked it. I loved the fact that he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna call this hole. I reckon it's gonna be good."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It's the passion that's exciting to see. What stands out as your favorite part of this whole process besides the fantastic dinners and good wine? Right? No, just kidding.
Probably the people that you know I've met along the way. Josh will probably say the language is a bit strong, but probably consider Josh a friend now. He might say a colleague or a really good colleague. And Graham, obviously, Graham Lever. I'm grateful to have met those two characters. We've shared some pretty funny times together through the discovery, and even before spending a night stranded in the middle of the Pilbara in July. Me and Josh sleeping in the car, and Graham on the back of the Ute. So
Yeah, that
yeah,
builds bonds, right?
yeah, but also the team that we put together, and just yesterday I got a message off one of the fieldies that we hired saying, "Hey, we're all going to the footy on Sunday. Do you want to come along?" And I'm like, I'm going to Diggers." So, but it's just that those relationships that you form through these things. It's like no one else outside of that circle knows what you went through. All those people understand it. Like they have different views and different opinions on how things
Yeah,
went,
yeah.
but there's all that sort of common thing that we shared, and yeah, they get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've worked with companies and people that I'm still friends with from before Discovery who left before things got crazy. And they don't share that same bond as the people who were there during the crazy time, right? It's there's something about that forged in fire of the Discovery that really cements some of those relationships and friendships. And like I hadn't talked to Aaron in many years, and we talked the other day, and it just brought back all the joy and excitement of that time, right? And you can't beat that. It's fun.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you probably had a conversation with him, and and I've had it with people who have left now, and someone will be talking about something about the discovery, and you sort of have a knowing look at each other or a glance that you're like, oh yeah, yeah, I remember that, yeah, well that's not how it happened, or yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it's definitely the people. And that extends to the people in the office as well, the admin people and our database
Yeah,
admin.
yeah.
Sort of again, I use the word loosely, friends, but there'll be a connection. Yeah, and I had similar experiences in my pre-geology days. Like I used to work at JB Hi-Fi, and
Mhm.
it was such an amazing place to work. It was like the original JB Hi-Fi over in Victoria. I'm still in touch with those people because we didn't do anything that exciting apart from sell people CDs and TVs and stuff.
Yeah.
Man, we just had so much fun. I think I'd like to think anyway that a lot of the people that were involved in the discovery, despite all the stress and the pressure, I like to think that they actually had fun and got something out of it.
Yeah, yeah.
They're probably all listening to this right now going, bullshit. Um,
Yeah. Feels that way sometimes, right? Where it's perception's greater than reality, and I'm like, this seems like it should be this way, and it isn't.
That's
Perhaps you could put some accordion music to the background of that and make it really romantic or something.
that's yeah,
The
yeah.
best of
We'll put the
times.
appropriate soundtrack
Yeah.
that's needed for this moment.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it's I don't know, like, I think that's one of the things that I kinda hope to capture in the process of this podcast is just the how different that feeling is, right? And then you go through in future, companies and you're hoping to, obviously, every time you're hoping to make a new discovery, right? But you're hoping to reestablish that and see how it plays out this time, right? Like, what's gonna be different with the team, this new team now because they're all different people, and what's gonna be similar, and it's just an exciting feeling.
Yeah, for sure. And I think during the discovery, like if someone came up to me and said, "Wow, what's it like making a discovery?" And sometimes I'd say I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Um, but in hindsight, I I really hope that other geos that I work with get to experience that. I hope that the geos who went through the Andover discovery, maybe they were logging core or so maybe they weren't at the coal face of the
Yeah, yeah.
discovery initially. Hopefully, when they go on to their next role, or maybe even right now, they're working somewhere and they can take that and go, well, I know what to do.
Mm,
I know someone who I can call
yep,
when I do make that discovery.
yep.
Because that was something we were talking about. Like, there's a bit of a business there, I think, for
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think I think the aspects of because I think the discovery part, depending on the organization you're in, the team you're in, I think it's like it's so different for different people that it's no like I read this thing like from an AFL coach, they were saying that they're like, oh, like what prepared you for like winning the premiership, and they were like winning the premiership, right? Because like unless you kind of get there, like no one really like like no one can tell you what that process is until you go through it and you go, yeah, now we understand. Like so then you're kind of better prepared to do the next one because you already had that experience. And yeah, and I get your point. I think it's interesting, like organizations, I think that are successful ones. The reason why I think they might be more successful is that if they have the ability to keep everyone together and they can keep the construct of that organization as similar as possible, like I think they have a better chance of making another discovery along the way.
And you build that faith with investors and board members and things like that who know that
Yeah.
you have been through it before and you're not likely to drop the ball this time.
Yeah, that's right.
yeah. And when I worked at Aluka, we lived and breathed the idea of discovery, and we tested targets, and I was there for 9.5 years, and lots of technical successes, but we never quite got across the line with a big discovery, and the people that worked there, they were so good. They're good geos. I got a lot of
Hmm.
respect. I learned a lot from those people. But yeah, we just never quite got there in my time. Certainly, they'd made discoveries previously, like just
Yeah, yeah,
Ambrosia, and yeah. But yeah, it's I just hope that all the geos that worked at Andover can get that opportunity again.
yeah.
What's something that you learned from this process that has changed the way you view like future opportunities and current opportunities?
I think just having a little bit more conviction in the technical message that we're sending.
To management, to
Yeah,
board,
I
to
think so.
investors.
Management and, probably the investors. I don't necessarily get too involved in that at the moment, but yeah, just being probably a little bit more forceful and saying, hey, like if you want to invest in an exploration company, doesn't matter which one you invest in, like they're all going to have the same risk. This is our technical story. We're going to have a crack at it, and yeah, just try and push a bit harder. I don't think that's necessarily something I learned from Azure, but I guess
It's a good point though, because like I've talked to a couple, investors over the years who say they wish that people at companies would be more forthcoming with what the risks are and what the technical side of the geology is. And they often just get this, like the investor prezzo that is all sunshine and rainbows. And they're like, look, I understand it's risk because it's exploration. So just kind of like help me understand what the risk is. And I think that would benefit people is to be just more forthright, I guess, with the technical side of that, so that management can make their decisions and investors can make their decisions, from an educated standpoint.
maybe there's a bit of a disconnect because I think on the exploration company side, they probably think that maybe the investors and the brokers and maybe they don't want to hear that technical side of thing so much. So yeah, I don't know. I'm a minnow in this part of West Perth, really. So yeah,
Yeah, no, fair enough.
yeah. I guess probably one of the things, and maybe I've been thinking about giving this answer to a question, but it probably fits into that question. Probably the thing that I think contributed to the success the most is that, Josh Coombs is a very, very technical guy. Like, one of them, probably the best geologist I've ever worked with. No disrespect to anyone who's come before at Aluka or
Hmm.
even Azure, but he's really good at what he does. Humbly, I'm pretty good at what I do in terms of organizing shit. And so, we had a pretty good partnership, work relationship. And I think that, no matter what sort of geo you are, if you're more like me out there and you're good enough to be dangerous as a geologist, but maybe your strengths are getting things done, developing those relationships with a really technical person, and vice versa. Maybe you're really technical but you just hate people.
Yeah.
Or you're not very good at talking to people, trying to find that relationship. So it's almost like, a double act.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting you say that. Like, like knowing Graham. Yeah, I don't know Graham too well, but I do know him, and I know Josh, and I know you, and I think if you look at, like that, I think is that, like Secret Herbs and Spices. I think really in that, Josh is very good at certain things. What he's not good at is complemented by you and Graham, and vice versa. Like what you're not really good at is complemented by Graham and Josh, and I think that's the feeling that I get is like you guys were essentially one individual split into three bodies,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Like, so you could kind of do all of the different things. And that's also, I think, part of the story of discovery is that it's rare that it's one person that holds all of those traits, right? That like you need that people around. Even as good as a team you were, the role that Tony plays and how the fact that he was a geologist and the fact that like Tony's been at this caper for a while. So he's learned how to sell the technical story to investors as well as a non-technical story. Like Tony played a role in kind of getting the deal to get the ground that you guys got. Like all of those things have to kind of complement. I think that's one of the important things to say is like you don't necessarily need to be the technical propeller head to go and find discovery. Like, you can figure out what your role in that team could be, and if that's what interests you or that's what your passion, you can still contribute along the way.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've had the same experience. I think the teams that I've worked best in had people that offset my weaknesses, and conversely, I offset theirs. And when I've struggled the most in my career is when I'm on my own without someone there to offset my weaknesses. And it's almost to me now, because I've had enough experience on the other side of it, I am so much better in a team where it's, like these different strengths and weaknesses than I am on my own, that I always just regret when I'm on my own or doing something, like solo, because I go, well, I know I'm good at this part, but I'm really bad at this part, and I need someone here to back me up, and I've got no one. And that's just tough. It's because as you said, like when you're in that and it's working, it is like magic, right? Where it's just, you can just rely on those people to backstop you in a way that you're not capable of yourself.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. And I remember just going back to what you said about Tony. He sort of said to us in probably must have been around the time that SQM were starting to sniff around. He's sort of had a discussion about what's the potential scale here for this, and we crunched our numbers, and they were pretty conservative because we didn't want to. This is before drilling, so we didn't want to get everyone
Hmm.
too excited about it yet, and too much uncertainty at the time. And so we gave him our number, and sort of, he didn't bang his hand on the table, but he, said, "I want 100 million tons." And we, like Graham, Josh, and I, like nearly fell off our chairs. We're like, "Holy crap!" And then a few months later, maybe 12 months later, we're putting out an exploration target of 100 to 250 million tons. And I don't know what the resource is. Like, it wasn't out. It's not out publicly. It wasn't done by the time I left the company. But I suspect, based on the exploration results, that it's way north of the exploration target. But
Yeah. So one of the things that we talked about when we caught up for like a coffee before this interview, you talked about that there was like not everything went like well or right. Like there was a high levels of stress that obviously led to some tension within the team, either between management and the technical team, or even within the technical team. Can you talk a little bit about like how did you personally navigate that? Like, did you find that awkward? Did you find that like a challenging part of your team? Were you the peacemaker in that process? How did you navigate it?
yeah, I mean, I probably was the peacemaker. I mean, I'd put the team together and a lot of young geos, young fieldies, different backgrounds. We had, it was United Nations basically on site. Lots of young British geos,
Mhm.
Irish, Italians. Just
Yeah.
from all over the world, and it was pretty cool actually. It's probably part of the reason why we did so well.
Mhm.
It obviously comes with conflict.
Also, I think like like the nature of like you're having to train people at the same time. So like there's like people's egos have a different effect on like whether they know the information or don't know the information. There's obviously mistakes made in that time. Like how did you navigate that as the person at the top?
Lots of phone calls. Once the recruitment process was done, I thought, great, I'll be home free now. But lots of phone calls with lots of different geos at any one time. Talking about various issues they had on site, and so there was a lot to deal with. And I was the main. I had the senior on site in the early days, but he was just overworked and under the pump. And so, I was taking on a lot of that sort of administrative stuff, or just
Hmm.
that, people bouncing ideas and problems and issues around. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. It is all a bit of a blur, but I think I managed to handle it. But yeah, there was certainly conflict between various team members at the time, and I mean, the pressure was felt, constantly by the team on site. And, I'd get a phone call from, once we'd hired a couple more seniors and project geos, one of the drilling contractors had a rig turn up and it got off out the front of our core yard. And the story was that it wasn't actually coming to our project. It was just getting dropped there on its way to another project. And I get phone, oh, there's another rig turned up. Oh my god, we can't handle this. We don't have enough people for this. We don't have enough tough books. We don't, And I'm like, oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to tell you. Like, yeah, it's just being, it's just going to another project. Like,
Yeah.
we're just doing them a favor by storing the rig in our yard for a little bit. And
Yeah.
everyone was pretty highly strung, I think.
I mean, one of the things that I found was that when you realize what, like, your manager or the person that, like, is kind of telling you to do so, once you realize, and like, sorry for the crash, when I realize how much shit they have to eat to their job, like, like how much tension they feel, I think you get a different perspective and you go, yeah, you know what, I will probably crack it at this point as well. Like, yeah, if I was in that. And I think that's what to me, like the successful teams, like, where people show like, oh, hey, like, I know you feel pressure, but it's not like I'm sipping pina coladas here, right? Like, like I'm under the same pressure, all the way up to someone like Tony was under pressure as well to make sure that, like he doesn't blow up the deal, like gets the best outcome for shareholders, all of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to get calls from the geos, and they might be talking about their roster or something like that, and I could legitimately say to them, "Yeah, I know how you feel." Like when I first started, I was doing for 3.5 years. I did 2 weeks on, 1 week off.
Hmm.
So been there,
Yeah.
and I didn't even make a discovery at the time. So
Yeah. That's
you guys are under the pump, and we
yeah.
had form of having rigs show up unexpectedly as well. So I'm just thinking back, no wonder they were like, "Oh my god, there's a rig." So
It's a difficult thing, right? Like that managing of yet another stressor, right? Like, because actually, I talked to Julian after our interview, and I apologized for like that. I felt like I had been unfairly harsh on him because I had such a maybe a self-centered worldview at that time, and I was like, look, I'm sorry, I was like a problem employee, and he's like, no, you weren't a problem employee, you were passionate, and I can deal with people if they're passionate because I can understand it. If you have people who are passionate, they get worked up. Right, they get frustrated, they get maybe even angry at times, and I guess that's better than indifferent, because like these people that are getting worked up when a rig shows up, it's a heck of a lot better than when they've gotten so burned out that they go, another rig, great.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
uh, because it goes back to like what I really am interested in is there's all these healing experiences, and like you think about like lithium is such a different commodity than gold, and yet so much of the experience is the same. So we often ignore that when we talk technical discovery, and it's oh, those are gold geologists, and oh, those are and I go, no, like these are exploration geologists. These are people who looked at the rocks and they figured out something that nobody else knew, and they did something different with it. Like that's the commonality, right? Like that, was it Sir Harold Raggett that said, the discoverer is someone who's seeing what other people have seen, thinks something that no one else has thought.
I mean, the rocks are already there.
Yeah,
the rocks are actually there already. All the deposits are there already.
Yeah.
We've just got to find them, and it takes people to do that with new eyes, different ideas, the right combination of technical and somewhat technical and a good organizer.
That because I think it's key, right? It's so rarely one person. It's all of those skills are often found in different people.
It's never one person. That is the greatest myth we tell people, that it's that eureka moment. It's hardly ever a eureka moment.
Digging deep where the stories hide, through the hills and the mountains wide. Pickaxe swing and the earth unfolds, chasing dreams in the dirt and gold. Geology calling under our feet, secrets are buried in the rock and heat. With a heart full of wonder and a map in hand, exploring the treasures of this great land.